homosexuals, lesbians, sadists, masochists, and other sex deviants.
We are going to now indoctrinate children into the wonders of various sexual orientations.
Through this salacious material, these abnormalities are corrupting the minds and the hearts of our children.
Part culture war, part conspiracy theory, and always fascinating, moral panics are a defining aspect of modern mass media. Are violent video games making mass shooters? Can subliminal messages drive heavy metal teens to self-harm? And what on earth are we going to do about those obscene rap lyrics? At best, a moral panic can lead to progress as culture pushes back against obsolete prejudice. At worst, hearings are held, laws are passed, and people get hurt. The phrase moral panic should bring to mind wrongful convictions and ruined reputations, banned books and parental advisory labels. It should also bring to mind the Teletubbies.
Moral decay.
A sickness of the mind.
Upsetting moral effect.
Ought to be a law against them.
Perversion for profit. Here is the most vicious, the most insidious feature of these publications. They constantly portray abnormal sexual behavior as being normal. They glorify unnatural sex acts. They tell youngsters that it's smart, it's thrilling, it provides kicks to be a homosexual, a sadist, and every other kind of deviant.
Kids media is an easy target for conservative bullies and their war on queerness. Queer kids shows like Steven Universe face an enormous backlash. Big-budget Disney films are censored and banned around the world for the barest scraps of queer representation. State legislatures across the U.S. are working on bills banning books and drag performance as we speak. These attacks on art and culture can trace their roots through the Teletubbies and Sesame Street back to Batman and Robin, and it all stems from the same homophobic premise: that children's entertainment is involved in an LGBTQ+ conspiracy to brainwash or groom kids into becoming queer.
You can't turn somebody gay. I've been inundated with heterosexual representation from the moment I've been watching television or reading anything, and yet I'm not straight.
There's this misunderstanding about sexuality that it's molten and fluid when you're a kid, and they're so susceptible. One word, it pushes them over. This is all delusion.
In fact, Muppets and cartoon characters are not conspiring to subvert heteronormative society. But this falsehood is one of the most pernicious moral panics of our time.
It was just panic, especially panic in regards to kids, like parents terrified that their children could be queer.
It's a vile conspiracy theory that's as old as media itself, but this particular tale begins in the buffet of moral panics that were the 1950s.
Something happened in the 50s, this new morality came in, and the nuclear family was so strong that a homosexual is now something lower than dirt, just had to be exterminated.
What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious. You see, Ralph was a homosexual.
By the 60s, a gay person, if represented, was pretty much evil.
In this deeply conservative and conformist decade, under the shadow of the Red Scare, psychologist Frederick Wortham launched an attack on the dominant kids' media of the day, comic books. Riding on the coattails of a larger panic over juvenile delinquency, Wortham blasted comics in his book, Seduction of the Innocent. In his trademark, nigh unreadable gobbledygook, Wortham blames comics for nearly everything wrong with kids those days. One chapter, titled I Want to Be a Sex Maniac, is entirely devoted to psychological sex problems that comic books allegedly cause in children, largely focusing on the relationship between Batman and Robin. Some of the earliest Batman comics depict Bruce and his sidekick/ward Dick in all manner of situations that read very differently nearly a century later. Wortham depicts them in the most uncharitable light possible to imply the very worst. In droning passages, he writes creepily of the subtle atmosphere of homoeroticism which pervades the adventures of the mature Batman and his young friend Robin. even though there's no evidence that Bob Kane and Bill Finger had any such intentions when creating the characters. The moral panic led to Senate hearings on the comic book threat in 1954.
Comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency.
In response, the publishers created their own censorship board, the Comics Code Authority, to keep the books as square as possible and banning queerness under a blanket sex perversion provision. Today, we mostly know the grim and brooding Dark Knight, but there's a strong foundation of camp at the character's core.
Please, it's Batman!
From the kitsch masterpiece that is the 60s TV show to Joel Schumacher's unapologetic 90s bat butts. Kevin Conroy, the man who forever defined Batman's voice, was gay. Before he died, the actor wrote a comic about the experiences he drew on to create the distinction between Bruce Wayne and the Caped Crusader.
Bruce Wayne is the mask. Batman is who he is. It's all about putting on this face and putting on this mask. Especially before you come out, queer people identify with that.
Bruce Wayne's found family of orphans, street kids, and reformed supervillains has struck a chord with the queer community. After Wortham's attacks, DC introduced Batwoman and Batgirl to establish the dynamic duo's hetero bona fides in 1956. 50 years after her run as Batman's Beard, DC relaunched a new version of Batwoman as lesbian lawyer Kate Kane in 2006. Even Robin is canonically bi now, one of them anyway.
You think about ballroom culture, the house mother, the house father, that's their family. That's the people that they look out for each other. And that's basically what it is for the Bat family.
But if the moral panic had killed the superhero genre back in the 50s, there would be no modern Batwoman, no Tim Drake, and certainly no mad love between Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy.
It took so long, and it's so unfair that generations and generations of kids had to grow up feeling like who they are and what they are is just inherently adult and perverse and inappropriate because it doesn't belong in something that the wider world considers family friendly.
Comics today are more queer than they've ever been, but the road towards more inclusion has been long and difficult. By the 70s, the Comics Code was largely toothless. At the same time, the watershed Stonewall Uprising led to a revolutionary movement for LGBTQ+ rights. Queer underground art flourished, as it still does, but mainstream media would still be largely hostile to representation and would remain so for decades to come.
It wouldn't be till after Stonewall, which happened to be the same year as Sesame Street, that TV started opening up to at least having gay characters that could live. Kissing would come much later, but at least they could live.
It's sad, but I would almost appreciate even when it would come up in like a phobic way, because it would at least acknowledge that queer people existed in the world at all.
There were at least some social gains in the 70s. For example, we realized that TV should probably help kids learn instead of just selling them cereal. And so Sesame Street was born. But this televised revolution would only open up a new front in the culture war. From two best friends sharing bath times and bedrooms to a purple alien tumbling about with a TV in his tummy. As the 20th century drew to a close, the moral panic around queerness and kids was evolving as fast as the media itself. How would a supposedly more enlightened culture handle it? One word: